You are on the next level. This is The Beautiful Truth on breakfornews.com, where the expression is still free. And you're very welcome. This is The Beautiful Truth on breakfornews.com with Fintan Dunn reporting. Thanks for joining me. Well, we're going to take a look again at the case of Joan Webster. We already interviewed Eve Carson on this issue back in January of 2008. She is the sister-in-law of the deceased Joan Webster, murdered back in 1981. Eve was recently interviewed also by the legendary Steve Murphy. He's the broadcaster and lawyer. His show, The Law Business Insider, where she appeared on a show with Timothy Burke, who's the author of the Paradiso Files, which presents a theory on that killing and other killings in the Boston area, attempting to pin them on a Leonard Paradiso, now deceased. So we're revisiting this issue with Eve, and she's on the line right now. Thanks very much, Eve, for joining us on Break for News.
Thank you, Fenton. Happy to be here.
Okay, well, I'm very glad that you are. There's been a great deal of progress in your investigation since we spoke back in January of 2008. But maybe we'll just give people a little bit of background on it, those who are not familiar with the details of this case. And we should start with Joan Webster. Could you paint for us, Eve, a picture of Joan's life circumstances in general, who she was, what her career was, etc.?
Joan was an extremely vibrant young woman. She just always had a smile on her face.
Mm-hmm.
She had graduated from Syracuse University in interior design with honors and had worked for a couple of years in New York City. Did an outstanding job, a lot of accomplishments to her credit during that brief period. But she wanted to continue her education, decided to go back to Harvard Graduate School of Design for an architecture degree. And this was the second year of a 3-year program when we lost her. It devastated everyone. She was just an extremely endearing person. You could not help but be drawn to her and love her very much.
Indeed, and you have a photo of Joan on your website. That's joanwebstermurder.yolasite.com. That's YOLASITE.com. joanwebstermurder.yolasite.com. You have a photo of Joan there, and I think her character just shines out of that photograph. A beautiful young woman with a great life ahead of her, but a life that was cut short in 1981. Joan arrived at Logan Airport on Saturday the 28th of November 1981, and from there she disappeared. There was a huge manhunt. There was huge publicity attaching to Leonard Paradiso as being the culpable person in that disappearance. But it was until 8 years later that her remains were found buried in a shallow grave in Hamilton, Massachusetts in April of 1990. And the questions for us are, who murdered Joan? Perhaps you could just cover her movements in the last few days of her life, Eve. What was happening for her at the time? What were her plans? Where was she going? Why was she at Logan?
She had not been able to go home for Thanksgiving break the year before. Workload in her curriculum was extremely heavy, so she worked her rear end off. I mean, she really pushed very hard to complete an 11-week project so she could go home for Thanksgiving break. And she did go home. She made her presentation on the Monday before Thanksgiving and went home. I'm sure I can envision the typical routine. It's much like when I was out there. We'd go into the city for a show and visit with friends and little social gatherings, holiday with family.
And Thanksgiving was on what?
It was the 26th was that year.
Right.
On the Thursday. They had gone down to her grandmother's who lived in a retirement community. Friday they did go into New York for a show. Indeed, Joan was visiting all her friends. They went to a couple of cocktail parties Saturday evening before she inexplicably, for me, cut her break short and went back to Boston.
Yeah, why is she leaving to go back to Boston on the Saturday? Why is she not waiting until maybe Sunday night? When was she due back?
Well, she wasn't due back until Monday, November 30th, for the first day of classes after break. I'm not real clear. It never really made a lot of sense to me why she would break it short, where she worked so hard to enjoy that time.
Mm-hmm.
Her sister also lived in Boston, so she easily could have ridden back with her. The explanation that was given was that, and then this kind of evolved. This wasn't in the initial police reports. The initial police report said she didn't show up for classes, and that's when her classmates got concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But what evolved over the next week, really that first week, was that Joan had gone back to school to work with classmates on a project. And it always baffled me. It was kind of something that said, it was the same excuse. It was the same reason for her to be able to go home, as well as her coming back early.
Right, and you don't find that a convincing reason?
I don't. Certainly it was reasonable to believe that Joan might do something like that, but no one ever challenged it. No names ever came out of students she was supposed to be working with. There were a lot of fellow students who were quoted. Those kids just worked so hard, distributing flyers and reward posters and everything they could think of in a multi-state area, and they were terribly concerned and terribly distraught. I know that George Webster was quoted that Joan had called a classmate to see if they had supplies and materials to work on their project. But as I have reviewed this, I have gotten the phone records from that week, and Joan did not make a call like that. She never called.
The reason this is worth concentrating on, just to clue people in as to why we're talking about this, is that any deviation or unexpected moves in a person's movements in the days leading up to a disappearance, and as we now know, murder, could be vital and could be very significant. So you're looking for anything out of the ordinary, anything unusual in a murder, certainly an unusual movement, an unusual journey, or an unexpected journey. That it's always a significant issue in any murder investigation. This theory that she had gone back to start early on project work with classmates was substantiated then by George Webster, who said that, yeah, he remembers, or did he remember or overhear a phone conversation along those lines?
Yes, he actually sat with a reporter in their home and pointed to a phone. Pointed to the phone, I can picture right where it was, in a little pass-through window between their breakfast nook and a family room. And the phone sat right there, and that's the phone he would have pointed to and said she called from right there Saturday morning.
But
she did not.
She did not, and you're basing that on files which you have obtained, phone records. How did you obtain those phone records? Where did they come from?
The phone records came from a police department in New Jersey that was involved in the case. And yes, they are correct.
Okay, so these were part of the investigatory material. I suppose a phone log from the home would have been a vital part of that investigation. And you've taken a look at the phone logs for what time of day was it? When was it supposed to have happened?
She allegedly made the phone call that morning, Saturday morning, and then, of course, took the flight that evening. I've looked at the phone record for the whole week, and she did not. The only phone call that was made Saturday morning was a phone call to their local information.
That's very strange.
Had nothing to do with Boston. No calls went to the Boston area whatsoever.
There's one number, I'm just taking a look. I have this list of phone calls before me here now. There's one number ending in a 27, which was the Portuguese Chamber. What was that? And perhaps you could just give me a bit of background to that, Portuguese Chamber.
There are two numbers there, one right after the other, that they're only off by one digit. And in the police report, George acknowledges he made both of those calls. He said that the second number to the Portuguese Chamber was an incorrect number.